Welcome to the 10x Growth Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Saradha Sriram, business technology strategist. Today, we have an incredible guest who's redefining what it means to thrive in both business and wellness. Please join me in welcoming Sonia Hunt, author of the transformative book Nut Job, and a globally recognized speaker who's helping leaders worldwide unlock peak performance through health and wellness strategies. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Sonia, we are thrilled to have you here. I would love to start with your story. Take us through your early years and the pivotal journey that transformed you into the global wellness authority that you are today.
Yes, it is quite a story. So I am first generation Indian American. My parents came from India in the 60s. And when I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with severe food allergies, severe asthma, and severe environmental allergies. Now, my parents are big foodies. They used to have dinner parties, 4 or 5 times a week at that time. And the way we actually found out that I had this condition or these conditions was they had a dinner party and the kids were in the backyard playing, and a tray of snacks came out. And one of those snacks happened to be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And within, what seemed like seconds, after biting into the sandwich, I got hives all over my body and I actually went into anaphylaxis. And this was the first time it happened at age 3. And so, as you can imagine, right, there's chaos because there's kids all around, everybody's screaming. And, the parents came out to see what was happening. And, the grace was that there were many physicians at the parties who were friends with my parents. So we were kind of scooped off to the emergency room before 911, the ambulance even got there. And it was, during that time when I was in the ER that I got this diagnosis, which was very confusing to my parents who didn't actually even know that people can be allergic to food, right? And I had other siblings. So, neither of them have, any of these afflictions. So it was very just confusing information at the time. And the protocol, was a few things. It was to not eat the foods that you're allergic to, which we all know is very difficult. Even today in 2025, it is to take steroid medication to suppress symptoms. And what that means is that if you have another anaphylactic reaction, steroids, should suppress how toxic or traumatic that anaphylaxis is on your body. And then, the doctors kind of say, okay, do these 2 things and, you're out the door. Right. But again, as you can imagine, my parents are young from another country and they're just like confused by this whole thing. And it really started, I would say, an entire trajectory, right, of my life at that point. And over, the time of as I got older, some interesting things were happening. I was getting, the foods that I was diagnosed with that I was allergic to at that time was severe peanut, severe tree nut allergies. So like all of the tree nuts. And as I got older, some new things started to come into, my world because we would do allergy testing either, every 1 or 2 years. And so they were like random things like corn or banana or halibut fish, different kinds of, fruits like cantaloupe, honeydew, things like that. And unfortunately, throughout my life, I've been on the ER table almost dead 4 times. So after that first time at age 3, there were 3 more times leading up to really 2008, which was my fourth anaphylaxis. And that incident happened after I had eaten at a restaurant with a bunch of friends. And it was interesting because the anaphylaxis didn't happen immediately like it did when I was 3. It was delayed, which is a very scary thing. And I don't believe we actually knew that it could be delayed. And so I found myself, hours later after dinner and after I'd gone to bed, suddenly waking up because I felt like there was like, a massive weight on my chest. And if I could ever even begin to imagine what it feels like to have a heart attack, that's how I felt. And so I woke up in 2008 and I could see in the mirror that I had hives like all over my body, like they were even in my scalp. And I was already in anaphylaxis. I just didn't know it. So when you see yourself like that, you kind of start to hyperventilate. And, the immediate thing you should do is kind of dial 911, but really a lot of things kind of go in and out of your mind. And so I was able to get to the ER, and, the doctors said this was definitely an allergic reaction. And, it was so toxic that those hives actually did not leave my body for 1 year. So that time I spent in the ER and that having hives for 1 year all over my body, it was truly like a rock bottom situation for me, right? Why was this continuing to happen? 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times anaphylaxis? Same protocol. Sonia, don't eat the things you're allergic to. We're releasing you with a grocery bag full of medication. Western meds suppress your symptoms, which cause all kinds of things like brain fog and lethargy and things like that. And that's really when I said to myself, something's wrong here. I've got to really start to figure this out now, because I really believed if it happened a fifth time that I would be dead.
I totally empathize with you. Thank you for taking us back, walking us through your journey, especially sharing your lowest point and what sparked your determination. Right, the book that you wrote, The Nut Job, I would really like to deep dive into that, and that has been creating waves, and how you maintain, how you talk about sustainable success. I would like to get started discussing the book, but as you spoke about your personal journey, it took me back in time because I have two kids in a very similar situation as far as allergies. I absolutely empathize with your parents. I've been there, and I think what you share is very, very inspiring. In the book, you talk about the method 3 to B, the program that focuses on be safe, be healthy, and be well. Can you break down how this holistic approach differs from traditional allergy management, and what was the turning point in your healing journey?
Absolutely. So, and let me just take you back a little bit, right? So, after that diagnosis, if you can imagine, we as a family were absolutely, my mother like changed the way that I ate, right? And, back 10, 20, 30 years ago, we were reading labels, right? And the labels did not even have the kind of information that they have today. So you have to kind of make do with what you have, right? And as you know, as your children, are dealing with food allergies, there's that constant worry that, what's in your house, you feel like you can control. But the minute the kids step out of the house, everything is uncontrollable, right? Especially if they're young, right? At age 3, like me. And then as you become, a teenager, or you go off to college and so forth, that whole thing really changes, right? So what happened was, as a child, I've done all of the Western protocols. I've done OIT, which is oral immunotherapy. I've done the allergy desensitization shots, right? I've done the try to read the labels, and fend for yourself when you're out at a party. My mother cooked, all of our meals, but at the same time, when we went to lunch, the last thing I wanted to put in my lunchbox was chicken curry and rice, right? I wanted like a sandwich or chips and things like that. And so all of this becomes like a negotiation in a sense in the family, right? Because also labeling today still doesn't give the true information that you need to make the right decisions. So one thing I will say I did become, great at was asking questions and what are the right questions. So in 2008, when all of this happened, I had hives for 1 year. It took a year to go away. In that time, I was essentially, my career had been as a chief marketing officer. And I said to myself, okay, I, work on and complex business problems on a daily basis. should I not use that skill set, but apply it toward myself, right? To figure out this complex, problem that I'm dealing with. And that was kind of a realization to me. So I decided that I was going to figure out a new way. And after the hives were gone in 2010, I actually just bought my URL and I started blogging about what it's like to be brown with food allergies, right? You're kind of caught in the East and the West medicine, food, health practices, narratives, right? And I had this realization in the ER that I had a lot, like there's detriment to my mental, spiritual, and emotional health because of my physical health, issues. But I'd never really looked at any of that before in my life, right? Because also from a cultural perspective, it's not like you talk about mental health or your feelings or anything like that, right? In Indian culture. So I felt like possibly that could also have been, collectively brought this toxicity into my world, which caused this anaphylaxis incident to possibly be like 10x, right? So I had all these realizations and I thought, okay, let me have a creative outlet and let me just start blogging about like what my life's about. And so during that time, I was Googling because I felt like, okay, I need a program, right? If I'm going to like try to figure this out, well, what's my program? And of course, there's no program, right? Out there, personalized medicine and everyone's situation is different. So meaning your children and I might have a peanut allergy, but your situation is different based on genetic predispositions, how you take care of your health, etc. So the medication that I was on was about 30 pills a day. And it was causing true, like, exhaustion and, just brain fog. And I remember saying to my mom one day, like, I'm going to get fired from my job because I go into meetings and, I'm supposed to be running the meeting. And yet, like, my brain isn't working. And, I said, like, is there just a different path to figuring this out? So we started having, this conversation around Eastern medicine, Ayurveda, homeopathy. And, as a first generation Indian American, I will say that for most of my life, I tried to like shun my Eastern culture because I always wanted to fit in and be American. And this was the time in my life that was like, I will literally try anything to not feel this way, to get rid of my allergies. Like if I have to be open to anything out there that could help me, I will, right? So I decided that I was going to need to become empowered around my own health, right? My entire life, my physicians and my parents they ran my health. And even when I became a teenager or even when I went to college, I wanted to try to like forget everything. But, then sometimes you find yourself in the ER again, right? If you don't take care of yourself. So I decided I have to become empowered about this. I have to really, really now learn about my body system. It has to be a holistic approach because how could I make conscious decisions on behalf of my physical body if my mental health was kind of, not in a good place, right? And in order to do that, I, of course, needed help. So I sat down with my allergist and I said, I'm going to put a team together. I want you to be on it. I'm going to ask my primary care doctor to be a part of it. But I'm also going to ask a functional medicine doctor and an Ayurvedic, MD to be a part of this team. And what I want to do is I want to try to figure out why this is happening, because in all these years, this allergist that I'd been with for about 25 years, we've never talked about that, right? We've never talked about why this is happening. We've never talked about how do we get rid of it? Can we get rid of it? The answers were always like, you can't, so you just have to do this. And I was beyond that, right? There was some like fire that was lit in me in the ER when I went through like all the emotions that was just like really pissed to be right at this time, right? This was in 2008. at this time in life where we still didn't have these answers. And so I thought, well, I'm an intelligent woman. Why don't I go try to figure this out myself? So there was a lot of like, oh, well, not sure that you can do that. And I said, look, we cannot poo poo what I'm trying to do, because if you're going to poo poo anything, then you can't be on my team. But if you're going to be open to it, and so what I did was I found my 4 people, right? Allergy, primary care, functional medicine, Ayurveda. And I brought them together and I said, I have created a whiteboard in my house. I'm going to run this as a strategy like I would do in business as a CMO. And we are going to start with testing every possible thing that we could test in my body to get data. Now, I'm an engineer by degree, and I used to code back when I came to Silicon Valley, right? So the path I was on was a biohacking path. And, what I was doing it really all offline and through spreadsheets and documents and things like that. And, for the first time in my life, we were testing my whole body, not just my allergies, right? And one of the most interesting things that we tested was gut health. And that was because the functional medicine doctor said, have you ever tested your gut health? And I said, well, what's that? Right? So it became this process of me saying, we can't just stick to physical body anymore because this is affecting my mental, spiritual, and emotional health, right? So, and my allergist alone could not be, the one person that was a source of all truth there, because he was not an expert in gut health or root cause, right? Western medicine doesn't look at that. And again, speaking to my parents and learning a lot about Ayurveda, homeopathy, learning about functional medicine, focusing on root cause, I thought, that's a path I want to go down. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's, I think, the way that we should start looking about this. So as a true kind of like overarching, what am I trying to do is how I came up with 3 to be, right? 3 steps to be healthy, be safe, and be well. And what that meant was, my in conversations with my parents, their wish for, my siblings and I always was that we want you kids, to be healthy, we want you to be safe, and we want you to, prosper in life. I do think they always meant from a physical standpoint, right? Be physically healthy, be physically safe, right? Not in harm's way, right? And I just elevated that to thinking, right? It's really holistic health and safety and prosperity. And so that's how I came up with this kind of overarching like theme, if you will, of like what I'm trying to do in general in my life, more than just the physical health.
I love how you strategized this whole thing and made it very holistic. A lot of things that you said I resonated with, especially the toxicity of the culture that we come from and being in denial about allergies, because it took a lot of advocating for my kids and telling people a few things are not safe for them and how we had to abstain from eating them and explain why. Again, I have to say this. I've said this earlier during this conversation. You are truly an inspiration. Talking about you being an inspiration, I think you're also like a medical miracle in 2020. In the book, you do talk about it. In 2020, you were proclaimed in remission by your doctors, which is virtually unheard of among the 32 million plus food allergy sufferers today. What was your medical team's reaction? How did they explain your recovery?
Yeah, so first of all, again, there's certain words that were never in my vocabulary as it related to my health. Root cause, remission. We just, gut health. We never discussed any of this. Today, I still feel in the allergy community, we do not. I am a lone person out there. There's a few other people that are starting to talk about it. And I believe that really, again, because everyone's health is so personalized, you have to figure out what works for you, right? And no one is here to kind of put judgment on that, because there's no one path to healing. my journey, right? Again, we did not know that it would lead to remission. The only word in my brain was healing. I just want to heal. I wanted to heal mentally. I wanted to heal physically, spiritual, emotionally, right? I didn't want to feel that way that I felt every single day. I didn't want to have these hives all over me. So the reason I talk about my engineering background and biohacking, right, is because we talk about it a lot now, right? I mean, I was doing this back in starting in 2010, right? I was testing biomarkers, right? We weren't even talking about it in 2010. So becoming empowered around your health, I did a ton of Google research, and I looked up, like, stories of people who had other afflictions who then had some health transformation. There's so many people out there. You just don't hear these stories, right? Because I needed to feel like, okay, is this possible? Can I actually do it? Or, is the one thing we've always been told, which is there's like, no cure for any of this, right? So my journey was really a journey of healing. And the biohacking started with testing every possible thing I could in my body and taking all that data. And as a team, we started to now analyze it. What did it mean, right? What strategies do we want to put into place across all parts of my health, mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, physical health, right? And how long were we going to test those strategies, retest, right? Body system, and tweak to hit optimal outcome. So what's the optimal outcome we're trying to hit? This is truly, like, today with AI, right? This is I'm so excited that AI is here, because now you can start to automate all of these things. So I was truly in the weeds with my doctors. One of the biggest things that the doctors believe was a lever to go toward my allergies, going toward remission, was the gut health testing. I had severe leaky gut and all kinds of other ailments around, the gut lining. So what we were trying to figure out is, like, when food comes into my system, right? What's the relationship between oral microbiome, putting, something in your mouth, and as it gets down to your gut microbiome? And then, well, can you heal the gut? Yes, you actually can. How do you heal the gut? Here we go again. Changes in food, a lot of strong supplementation. And a lot of that came from the Ayurvedic homeopathy side. And it also came through the functional medicine side. And we had to test, tweak, we had to test, different supplementation, dosages, what were we trying to get out of it? Now we retest my body. So this whole process became a 10-year journey. And in that journey, in 2015, when I gave my TEDx talk, we had results, because we would test my allergies every year. And what that means is that, yes, they do skin testing, but we do component level blood testing. And the component level blood testing was showing at year 5 that they were, like, reducing. Again, we didn't know that that would mean 5 years later, in 2020, is when we got those results that actually showed that they were all absent. And my allergist said for the first time, "You're in remission." And I said, "Say what?" I couldn't understand, like, what he was saying. And he said, showed me the results. And he said, "You're officially in remission," which, by the way, it is a status, because with OIT, it can happen, and it does happen. It's just that OIT, oral immunotherapy, is typically not for adults. It's for children. And then, of course, there's kind of, outgrowing. You might have allergy when you're young, and a year or two later, like, it might just go away, right? My body was different, because as I got older, I got more and more and more and more. So we do believe that gut health testing and healing was a big lever. Now, of course, you can do all the blood tests and tests you want in the world. The biggest, test to do is called an oral challenge. And so after we got all these results, for months, I sat in the doctor's office, and I had to eat multiple times every single thing that I was once allergic to, which is very scary. And after that, I also, because I had some medication allergies, I went through a whole time frame, another year of just testing the medications. And, for the first time in my life since I was 3, when the hospital system starts to remove your allergies, from your medical record, you have a clean medical record, right? And so for the first time when that happened, when we finished the medication Allergies, it was like, you don't even really know how to react because you've never had this in your life before. So for me, again, we were testing things like biomarkers, but the doctors believe that the gut health was, seeing in what, toxic, dramatic state it was in. And to heal your gut is a lifelong process. I still work on it today, right? But I mean, like, everything in my world had to be changed, including products that I put on my skin because it seeps into your microbiome. The toothpaste you use seeps through your oral microbiome into your digestive system. And this is, again, we just don't talk about this in the allergy space. And so that's why I built that brand, my personal brand in a sense, and started blogging, because I was like, I just got to keep sharing everything I know, which eventually led me to write a book about all of this. And what worked for me, right? Because I say that, again, like, there's no one out there that can tell you, if you do 1+1, you're going to go into remission, right? Even my doctors didn't tell me that. We didn't know that could happen. But the way that the book is written is all about a journey to healing. And in general, if you are doing these steps, you are going to start getting healthier. You are going to start feeling better, right? And I think everyone should have a North Star, if you're dealing with severe allergies like I was, to one day overcome them.
You have gone from a food allergy sufferer to a TEDx speaker and activist. How has your relationship with food and your body completely transformed? And what does thriving in life look like for you now?
Yeah, that's such a it's such a great question. I always just had a terrible relationship with food. I had a terrible relationship with myself, and this was part of what I was trying to heal. I always saw myself as someone who's sick, right? And who didn't deserve to be healthy, right? I always kind of look down upon myself. When you have food allergies, especially like I did with anaphylaxis, your brain, it cannot turn off unless you never eat again, right? It's always on 24/7, because if someone puts a bowl of chips in front of you, you now have to go ask the question, well, what kind of chips are these? Did you keep the packaging? Can I read it? And when you become like, a teenager, that's the last thing you want to do, is draw attention to yourself that you are different. Because when you're brown, you're already different, right? So just, I went through so much that truly caused me to carry all the worries of the world on myself and just be stressed out, chronically stressed my entire life. And I never knew even about these words like healing and what does that look like for me, right? When I started thinking about 3 to B, just in the simplest form, I was like, yes, I want to be healthy, I want to be safe, and I want to be well, I want to prosper, right? Can it be that simple, right? Is there a world for me where I'm in control finally with, of my health, because I understand my body system, right? I understand, like, what I'm putting into it, and then kind of what, manifests out of it, right? And again, not just the physical body, like the whole holistic viewpoint of it. So I did have to sit and this is in the book, I had to really like journal very difficult questions for myself around, like, what kind of life do I want to lead, right? Do I have purpose in life? Am I living that purpose? Or how do I have the right people around me who support me, even though I'm different and I'm sick, right? That if we're at a restaurant and I feel uncomfortable, will they get up and leave with me, right? So it's truly just a holistic viewpoint at all of these to try to figure out, what does thriving look like to me? And for me, it's leading a life with intention and purpose, right? It's helping other people. It's being kind to myself first so that I could, help and be kind to other people out there. And for the first time in my life, I mean, I do believe, right, these 4 anaphylaxis incidents happened because the universe was trying to teach me a lesson that I was not listening to the first 3 times. And so it was like, okay, I'm gonna like have you have anaphylaxis for a 4th time, but to make sure you're gonna learn the lesson, Sonia, we're gonna keep those hives on your body for 1 year. And it was a true awakening of like, just, what is happening here, and how do I start to really now understand it in new ways to start, moving toward healing. So yeah, thriving to me, is really about living, and living with intention and purpose, which I was never doing before all of this, because I was just attributing it all, right, to just being sick. But I think if you can step outside of that, right, and kind of see that for what it is and something that you can heal from, everything starts to really shift in life.
That is so wonderful to hear. Your insights from the book Nut Job remind us that sustainable success isn't just about strategy, it is about nurturing the leader within. I really want to thank you, Sonia. Thank you for joining us, the 10x Growth Strategies podcast today. I want to remind all our guests that your next breakthrough might just be one wellness decision away. Thank you.